The Army Painter is my favorite hobby company in the entire world. My desk is literally full of Army Painter products, and it takes me from being an average painter to putting above tabletop standard models out into the tournament scene. Not only that, but the Army Painter has sponsored more competitive play than any other hobby company in the industry. They allow us to keep doing the things that we do. If you enjoy the Army Painter as much as I do, head over to thearmypainter.com where you can use the discount code ARTOFWAR5 to get a discount on your next order. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Art of War stream. Really excited to be here as we are going to be talking about the most underrated army in Pariah Nexus right now, and it's a bit of a debate. So we're going to have a little debate here, and we'll be answering all your different questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to super chat. We'll be getting through those throughout the stream. But if you're joining us, please do give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends about us. All of that massively helps us grow. In addition, leave a comment below letting us know which faction you think is the most underrated right now in Pariah Nexus. I think there's a couple options, as you'll see when we debate it. But there, you can make a justification for a bunch of different ones. And finally, if you do want more content from us, including 3 battle reports a week, Jack Theory, 40k puzzles, all sorts of cool stuff, check out the War Room at thewarroom.vhx.tv. It's a 3-day free trial, and you can get access to all that content tested out, in addition to our awesome community and mobile apps. So let's go ahead and we've been playing a lot of Pariah Nexus. We played all the different armies. There's a couple choices here. I think there's like 4 or 5 that really stand out in my brain that could be the most underrated.
Which one's the first one on your mind?
Well, let's just pull up this little graphic here. We've got old G-dubs with their war comm, and we can kind of just scoot through some of these factions real quick. So
GSC, I think, is a little bit underrated. I played them yesterday. I'm not going to claim that they are a good army. They are not. We'll get there eventually, hopefully. I have no doubt. GW, fixes these things. They're not a good army, but they do have things that they do. I think Eric Lathuris won an event with them.
Yeah, in Australia.
With one type of army, like one archetype. And I believe someone else won an event with like 30 aberrants as well. There are things to be done in there. Legitimately, the things that the army was doing yesterday, or some of them, felt pretty good.
Yeah, those Acolyte Flamer units are quite good. A Ridge Runner is a solid data sheet. The Fight First Access, very good.
Aberrants felt pretty solid. You kill a unit, Aberrants plus Abominant, they hit pretty damn hard. Then you kill the unit, half of it fights on death, the character explodes at you, stands back up after that, the unit 50-50 to go into reserves, and if it does, it just comes right out of reserves and charges you at like +2 or 3, and the character beats you up again and then explodes at you again. It's cool. It's cool.
I think the FAQ update to Blips, that quality of life change, to help make it so that if you have just a unit stuck there, you can still use it. I think that is, they need more of that. There's a bunch of things in the GSC book that are just too difficult to use, kind of like Admech had.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll get some changes. I do think they are one of the bottom factions in the game, but I think there's more play than, it's not just you have no play. It's very similar to Admech. Like, I was winning games with a trash style. It wasn't the most fun way to play. It was very narrow set of data sheets that you could use, but if you outplayed people, you would win games.
GSC, the main issue is it has no units that can take a punch well. Even Aberrants, which are supposed to do that, are just toughness 6, -1 to wound if they're led by a character, but a 5-up into a 5-up feel no pain. They don't take a hit particularly well. They punish you for doing it a little bit sometimes, but they're not great at that. That's the main issue that Genestealer Cult have. What I think we need in GSC legitimately is some reliability on the mechanic to bring guys back. A thing I had suggested to me that I think is pretty good is that at each battle level, at Strike Force, I don't remember. The 1,000 Incursion, Strike Force, and Onslaught. Okay. At each level, you get a certain amount of points that you get to bring back. So let's say at Strike Force, theoretically, you got to bring 400 points of units back, 500 points of units back. And so in some matchups, you'd make that the Aberrants. And in some matchups, you'd make that, other parts of the army, right? You'd make that the troops or whatever. You bring it back a couple times, and you get a certain amount of points that you get to automatically bring back. Once you've used them up, you're done. No, hey, I hit all my 4-ups, so I have 4,000 points. Or I didn't hit all my 4-ups or 5-ups as the game progresses, and I have 2,000 points of GSC that are priced like they come back. I think that would be very interesting. They could finagle the points in there somewhere, maybe 300, maybe 400. Who knows? But
or it's you had a certain amount of battle line and then a certain amount of non-battle line. Like they can do a bunch of things where you can plan out your game plan, and it's not feel as bad for you or your opponent.
Make it like a point system where you get like 10 swarm points or something at the start of the game, or you get swarm points every turn or something. You spend those to bring units back. Who knows? But point is, there needs to be some reliability on the mechanic of bringing units back, and probably just some quality of life tune-ups to a lot of the strats and detachments and whatnot. There are just some stratagems that like kind of just don't do anything, which is not ideal.
I feel that.
So, but I think GSC has some things that it does. Nick was legitimately impressed by some of the things that the army was doing, and I liked it. I had fun. I had a lot of fun. Speaking of which, we have a 10-pound super chat. Says, Jack, please do more grudge match streams like your game against Nick with GSC. It was very vindicating to be able to point to and prove to my friends that world leaders actually aren't brain dead. Yeah, they seem brain dead on the surface because they're telling you to be brain dead. But if you want to actually do well with the army, you have to put a lot of thought into how you approach it.
Well, I mean, you've seen this too. Like it was very common for End of Leviathan for only a couple players with world leaders really regularly doing well at events. And those are the players that really mastered the technique of trading units very carefully and then waiting for your opponent to slip up.
Yeah.
It's like a patience army.
The analogy that I talked about with Nick at before our game was Nick's like, oh, all you have is a hammer. So it's a very simple army. And I'm like, yeah, but you still have to play a game of 40K, right? So it's like all you have is a hammer, but you still have to build a house, and all you have is a hammer. So you have to find ways to use that hammer in unique and interesting ways in order to solve problems that other people use, dedicated units for. You have to find ways to solve those problems with just your one tool, which is combat. And I think that's personally very fun. I think that's super interesting. And the game yesterday was a lot of fun.
So thanks so much for that super chat. Appreciate your support. We've got sisters here. Nobody will ever claim that they are
They're not underrated.
They're one of the best armies in the game. Bringers of Flame is absolutely insanity. Admech. So Admech got their buffs with the last data slate, and now we're sitting around that 47, 50% win rate. Several top Admech players have won GTs, and they performed relatively well in some of the big UKTC super majors. A bunch of teams at WTC took them, and they performed okay there. Not amazing, but okay. They do have some bad matchups. They still struggle against 2-up save Armor of Contempt type armies, but they have a lot more play than previously, and you can actually run an amount of guns and kill things.
Yeah, for sure.
Previously, that was basically you would kill a couple points of your opponent's army. You would kill maybe 3-4 units, and then you would just be move blocking them, tying them up, etc., etc. So there's more varied playstyles to Admech. Now, some of their other detachments that aren't Hunter Cohort do struggle a lot, but Hunter Cohort as a whole is extremely strong. However, Admech players themselves seem quite happy with the update.
Yeah, and I can imagine
I've barely seen any sort of complaining about it. Yeah, data som isn't as good as it should be, and some of the data sheets still need a little bit more of a tune-up. But overall, I think the Admech players have been generally pretty happy. I think people would just feel like Admech is kind of in that Votann area now, where it's just a solid army, just okay.
Yeah,
doesn't do anything amazingly well, but it does a bunch of things pretty well.
Significantly more obnoxious to play into than Votann. That is a compliment.
Yeah.
Because it has stealth across the board in Hunter Cohort, and it has invulns across the board. It's just, man.
And now you can -1 to hit in melee.
Yep. It's tough, man. It's tough to get through that army, and the whole while now it's actually shooting you with guns I have to respect. That is frustrating. And in a good way. Good armies have mechanics that if you want to just execute your game plan will frustrate you.
I think one of the things that might lean towards it being one of the most underrated is the fact that it's not the most popular Imperium army. It's one of the ones you don't typically see. Maybe 3 people at a 32-person GT at most will be running Admech. So it's not something you're going to experience every single event that you go to, like a Space Marines or a Tau or any of the most popular armies. So with that said, it could be underrated because there's not that many reps into Admech that the average player is going to get.
Yeah, or not a lot of content they can listen to about it outside of maybe, the Art of War 40K.
Yeah.
And not a lot of games they can watch on War Games Live or whatever and see tournament games with Admech. Yeah, just the institutional knowledge of Admech is pretty low.
But I don't think when I look around the forums, when I read the various conversations that are going on, I don't see a lot of Admech's so bad. Admech's, it's really hard to win with Admech, all these different things that I had previously seen. And I would argue that in Leviathan, Admech was one of the most underrated factions.
For sure.
Because there was one playstyle that could work and it would catch people off by surprise, certainly the first couple times they played against it. But now I'm not seeing as much of that chatter about Admech. There's just not that much Admech conversation in general. Yeah. I think it's due to lack of reps.
But I agree. I think Admech is really quite strong right now, and it is primed for a player to do well with it if they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Tyranids. So Tyranids got a series of buffs in the data slate as well, and a couple of their detachments gain some increasing amounts of power, like Vanguard is quite good right now. Invasion Fleet is still a solid detachment, although a little bit worse than it was previously. The Synaptic Nexus, the one that John had loved in early Leviathan when the Codex released, that one's significantly better now with the increasing amount of Battle Shock shenanigans. So, and then Tyranids have Crusher Stampede now, and those type of lists have started to do well. Tyrannifexes with the Rupture Cannons, a bunch of Maleceptors, just a really tough army to deal with. So, Tyranid players, I still think are on the more negative side towards their faction, is what I have at least experienced reading things. I still think this faction is pretty darn solid.
Yeah, I've seen people. I think it's pretty decent. I know that basically, no matter what we say about Tyranids, people will get mad at us in the comments about it. I'm not 100% sure why that is. I think it's a solid army. I think it's got some things it does that are quite strong. Its lone ops are some of the best in the game. It has some really good score manipulation. So, just battle shocking your opponent's key units or battle shocking your opponent's units when they try to contest your objectives, but yours don't get battle shocked when you contest their objectives is actually a sizable impact on the course of the game, because it forces your opponent to do more risky things, expose more units, reach a little deeper into your army to try to kill your lone ops. That sort of stuff's annoying. And then backing it up is a series of monsters that are pretty thick, pretty durable, tough to get through quickly, and all combined can shoot hard enough that it hurts to just step out. And I think that's pretty well designed, to be quite honest with you. I like that there's about 4 detachments that are pretty good. Yeah, I think Codex Tyranids, I would never say that it's broken or anything, but I think it's pretty solid. I think it lands right in this is in a good place territory.
Yeah, and I haven't seen too much chatter from the community at large that this is a bad faction or anything of the sort. So I don't think it's that underrated. I think it's kind of floating in that if you're a good player, you'll get a lot of advantages from playing this army. But if you're, an average, more casual player, it's still going to be an uphill battle into some of the meta choices.
Yep.
Tau Empire.
I don't think that's underrated. You would know better because you've heard a lot of Tau stuff.
So I think there is a certain part of the Tau community that feels a decent amount of negativity towards the current Tau rules because they are very punishing in certain ways. This army is an army that has to often trade or activate multiple units at the same time to be able to get damage done. And they have to also then have the proper guiding units in position, these observers to be able to guide. And that can be either you mess up what you're doing and you all of a sudden lose in that turn with your opponent's follow-up, or you do the amount of damage that you need to, and it's a relatively easy game after that. And I think that's how most people end up playing Tau. Yeah, they don't add the extra move blocks and all the tricky things that you can do with Piranhas and Pathfinders and the movement shenanigans that Tau have. And I think Retaliation Cadre has been the one that most people are gravitating towards right now. It's easier to play than Kalyun. It's active the entire game, unlike Monka, and it has access to Torstar Gambit, the Fire and Fade. So it's just a solid detachment all around. It's not amazing at doing any one thing, but it's more of a toolkit for doing a lot of different things. And because of that, I think Tau players, as they've gravitated more towards Retaliation Cadre, have felt happier playing the army.
Okay.
Is what I would say.
I could see
that. I think, early on, people were playing mostly Monka Kalyun with the Codex, And as those detachments were more fully explored or nerfed, with some increases to points and stuff, that Retaliation Cadre has become more of the dominant way to play Tau, is what I would say impressionistically.
And let's be honest, right? Retaliation Cadre is the coolest one, right? Everyone loves battle suits.
Everybody loves battle suits.
Everyone loves cool mecha, and these are cool mecha, and you get to play with them, and they go fast, and they hit hard, and then they leave, and then they hit your opponent again, and they have cool enhancements. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Retaliation Cadre is the best detachment, but it's probably the one I would play if I were playing Tau, just because cool battle suits go burr.
Yeah, and it's the one I think that's the easiest for the average player to play, because you just get the rule. You don't have to plan your entire game plan around certain turns and activating everything that you need to on those turns.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel that it's too underrated.
No, I don't think so at all.
All right, we got a couple more super chats here. We got Just Some Dude with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. What kind of advice do you have for painting models? I enjoy painting, but when I get home from work, I'm too tired to paint.
Yeah, I hear you, bud.
Why don't you do it from your perspective?
I'm horrible on this. I want to have painted models. I want to paint them myself. I can do a decent job. But I getting the motivation to actually paint my models, to actually spend the time to do it. Yeah, that's tough for me. So what I do, also I'm like glacially slow at painting. I don't know what it is. But one thing that helps me a lot is to set a goal for an upcoming event. If you don't go to a lot of events, then this probably doesn't work for you. But I like to say, hey, by this event, I need to get X and Y units ready. And that gives me a deadline, and it gives me something that, I have to do. So when I was going to a tournament just like an hour or two away, I set the goal of, I was taking Eldar, I set the goal of painting up the entire unit of Wraithguard. And I got it done by then, and I'm very happy with how they look, and that's what helped me get over the hump. It doesn't, I don't go home every day and paint, not even close, but if I set myself a goal with a time limit and I get to show them off at the event and I get to be proud of them, then that helps me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I had a team tournament back in April with Jack and some of the other guys, and my Votan hadn't really gotten a paint update in a while, since 9th edition, and I really just wanted to help make the army look better. So I decided to play it at that event, and that gave me the motivation to paint up the tanks, and they look a heck of a lot better now than they did back then.
A heck a ton of a lot better.
And then recently, with the hype around Blood Angels, I was like, I have my new Dante. He's just been sitting gray on a shelf, not doing anything. I was like, all right, it is time to get this man ready. And so within a couple hours, I painted him up. And I think if you're a slower painter overall, one of the methods that has helped me is, first of all, I want to get my models to above tabletop relatively quickly. I'm not trying to paint Golden Demon or anything like that. If that's your goal, that's going to require a totally different skill set, and I'm not going to comment on that because it's not my skill set.
Yeah, right.
I'm not that good of a painter. I think I could do very well above tabletop models, but that's kind of where I aim. So typically what I do is I try and do whatever the main paint color is. I do that. I do all the highlights for it, and then I start adding in other colors as needed. And once you have that really good looking gold on Dante, and then I add a bit of white on his different wing areas, and then I add green on the his laurels, all of a sudden the model's starting to look a lot better. I paint the gun, the metallic colors, put the shade paint on there. Just do the main color really well, and then start adding those other colors on where you don't need as much highlighting to make the model look brighter. And that method has helped me a lot paint quicker.
Yeah.
Not get overwhelmed with all the pouches and the belts and stuff early on. Don't even worry about that early on. Yeah,
my main issue is that I'm something of a perfectionist when it comes to calling a model done. So when I call a model, a lot of my models are not done. They are 70% done, 60% done. But getting them all done, it's oh my God, every pouch needs to be edge highlighted and whatever. And I wonder why I'm so slow. I don't know.
Yeah,
figure it out.
How I treat my models is that there's always more work I could do on these, and if I have time in the future and really want to do it, I will. But once they look above tabletop, I just leave them at that, and that's good enough. Redrum, thanks so much for the £5 super chat. If Custodes is one of the underrated ones, I'm going to punch the screen.
Don't worry, they're not. They're not.
I don't believe anybody thinks Custodes are one of the best. Not necessarily one of the best, but they have limitations. Everybody understands that, I think.
Yeah, there are some people who think they're pretty decent, and I would have a
I think they are.
discussion.
I think they are decent. I think literally the Warden data sheet, Guard with Traxxas plus Caladius tanks is better data sheets than a handful of armies.
That's true. Having very little support for them. I mean, we'll cover this when we get to Custodes.
100%.
But I'm not about to call them underrated. We're missing one.
Whoops. Yep. So definitely a not Alfarius. Thanks so much for the €5 super chat. The screen is one of the underrated ones. I'm going to punch a Custodes. In fact, I'm probably going to punch one anyway.
Don't do that.
Somebody's mad at the golden bananas.
There's not a lot of them, okay?
Somebody's been experiencing 4 pain. STE, thanks so much for the £5 super chat. GSC vs. World Eaters was amazing. Everyone should watch it. Any plans for more army swapping matches? It was really helpful to see you versus your own team. Yes, there are. I plan to play Real Space Raid Drukhari at some point against Quentin.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I think that detachment, I personally think Real Space Raid is actually stronger than Sky Splinter against top players, and I want to try a couple different builds with it. But yeah, I actually will be playing Drukhari, and I think there's a decent, like Quinn sometimes switches factions in different ways.
I pick up factions off people. Yeah, I mean, if people are interested in playing a particular faction, then they totally can. And so sometimes you get matches like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes Nick writes checks that his mouth writes checks that his body can't cash. You know what I'm saying?
Then we got Slack Onion with a $5 super chat. Thanks so much. What's the most understated sort of faction? Harlequins, Ynnari, Scions, Imperial Agents, Kroot, Beast Snaggas.
Beast Snaggas.
Beast Snaggas by far.
Actually, it's probably Ynnari, but Ynnari are just Eldar.
Ynnari is Eldar with a character in there. It's cool. And they get good Drukhari data sheets. Ynnari, I'm not going to treat as this, but yes, it would be Ynnari. But one of the lesser ones, I'd say Beast Snaggas.
Yeah. Beast Snaggas are... You can build an army out of just Beast Snaggas if you want.
And they hit hard.
They're pretty good. It's just every Beast Snagga data sheet is just good, except for the Beast Boss on Squiggle Sword, which feels personal because it's my favorite unit in the book, and I keep trying to play it, and they keep telling me don't play it because they give it horrible rules and cost it too much. Used to be pretty good. But now they're like, hey, what if it was 8 wounds with a 5 of Feel No Pain and toughness 5 instead of not that?
I'm definitely going to be Quentin on the racks.
Yeah.
You see the power of the racks. All right, so that's that. Space Marines, one of the best armies in the game.
People see that.
Generic Space Marines is not really a thing. Ultramarines is the best out of them, but it's, no.
Yeah.
Just play your Blood Angels, your Dark Angels, your whatnot. This is competitive 40k, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Orcs. Orcs is pretty interesting.
I don't think they're underrated by the community. I definitely underrated them, though. And that if you've seen some of my recent Orc games, you'll see that I'm starting to like some of the things the Codex can do. I was kind of a Debbie Downer behind the scenes on Orcs, but I played a couple games with them, and I really like some of the things that they can do. I really like kill rigs. I really, really like Beast Snaggas with the Beast Boss. That unit hits really hard for 185 points, and it's kind of annoying to remove because until you kill the Beast Boss at the end, you haven't removed at least half of or more of the unit's damage. So that's really good. Knobs are really good. Masked flash gits, which we don't. I mean, we own. We need to find time to build and paint them.
Yep, we do own them now.
Those are pretty good as well. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. The 4-man, Squighog Rider units are also really annoying for 160. They're tough to kill. They move fast. They can't be slowed down, which matters, sometimes, I guess. And they hit pretty damn hard.
-1 to wound in the Warhorde is annoying.
That's right. Yeah, Warhorde. Pretty solid.
All right, so Orcs is potential. Necrons, nobody's going to consider them underrated.
Nope,
Dark Angels, nope. Chaos Space Marines, they have a lower win rate overall. I think we're a bit higher on them than the average metrics of the meta would suggest. And that's, I think, because of twofold. Is that one, there's 2 different core builds that you're seeing perform really well with Chaos Space Marines, and it's not the typical Renegade Raiders.
Yeah, I think Renegade Raiders is actively not a good army. People like
It's
it
okay.
a lot.
It's okay.
It's just fine.
It's okay.
Right?
If your opponent doesn't really understand what the army is doing, then they're gonna punish them, because Renegade Raiders, almost all their key rules are reactive against your opponent being on objectives. If you stand on objectives with your key units against Renegade Raiders, you're going to be absolutely punished.
Yes,
but if your opponent says, hey, all your rules interact with me being on this objective, and I played my Votan Renegaders, all right, well, don't worry, the Hearthguard and the Land Forts are never going to touch an objective. All my other trash will, and you can kill them, but they're going to die a million other ways anyway. And you're going to have to trade real things to get out onto those objectives.
Renegade Raiders does not really have a way to kill a land fort that doesn't touch an objective. If it touches an objective, sayonara, baby.
It's dead.
But if it just doesn't touch the objective and some nonsense touches it instead, they don't have an answer to that. That's like good, you know? And I looked at Renegade Raiders a lot. And I eventually concluded that I just couldn't trust my opponent to stand on objectives with units I wanted to kill. Because if they're bad, I feel like if they don't see that is how they win the game, I feel like I'm going to beat them anyway. And if they do see that's how I'm going to kill their units, then they are going to just not stand on objectives with key stuff, and it's a real problem. Now, the armies that I think are actually really good, I think Pact Bound is still crazy. Yeah. That's my favorite.
Damage output is through the roof. But the Cultist detachment is actually one of the best performing CSM detachments, and Accursed Cultists, really good.
Accursed Cultists are
WTC
really
proved
solid.
that. There were several different archetypes, both Pack-Bound and the Cultist detachment, that had 3 max units of them. They are still really good. Yeah, they're not as good as they were in the index days, but man, they're still very efficient for what you get, and they're a profile that's not that easy for certain armies to deal with.
Something that I will say about the game right now is that there are a lot of units that got nerfed since the start of the edition, and people just kind of slept on them. We'll cover this when we get to Eldar for sure. But people sleep on units that get nerfed. But the thing is, the game's power level is way down since the start of the edition. So if Accursed Cultists got hit pretty hard, that's fine if the rest of the game came down to match. And that's what I think happened. And they're really good. I think Accursed Cultists are really solid. If you're running Chaos Cult, 3 units of them hit with the force of, the Chaos Gods themselves. Like, the amount of buffs you theoretically could hand a unit. I mean, I know there's Desperate Pacts and you can kill yourself and blah, 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 blah. But I know there's Desperate Pacts in here. But the amount of buffs you theoretically can hand a unit is like +1 to hit, +1 to wound, +1 strength, +1 AP, reroll hits, reroll wounds, and I'm missing one in there somewhere. And you just absolutely blow people up. If you're taking that, I think you take 3 units of Accursed Cultists and you just back it up with like Vindicators, right? Yeah. I don't see the need to run 120 cultists, right? Or 60 cultists and 60 Traitor Guardsmen. Whatever, But the Accursed Cultists are pretty good. Vindicators are pretty good. Forge Fiends are pretty good. Other stuff's pretty good. If you're running Pack Bound, it's kind of the same deal, honestly.
Yeah. Legionnaires and Rhinos are good in every different detachment. So I think this is underrated by like the larger community, not so much by top players, I would say, based on WTC.
Yeah.
Custodes?
Custodes, I think they're overrated. Playing with them, I just feel like I have no tools. So it's really up to my opponent. And how well does my opponent allow me to walk 6-inch moving guys around the board?
Free Rapid Ingress Venatori is a good tool.
It's cool. It's cool. They're still very expensive, but they are a good bonus to have, right? 165 for 3 is not terrible. The tanks are still really good. Caladius are still a great data sheet. No questions there. But it does feel like I have like 2 strats in the army, and none of them are like mobility or dynamism or anything like that. So they're not my favorite at this point, even though the army is one of my favorite armies. The current iteration of the Codex is really not.
And here's Redstrom's question about Custodes. What do you think of the Polish WTC list? Thanks so much for the super chat. It is 2x4 Wardens, 1 guard unit, Valyrian, Blade Champion. Yeah. Draxus, 2 tanks, Rhino, 2x3 Venatori, 2x4 Prosecutors, 2x4 Witch Seekers, Calidus Assassin.
So it's a lot of trash running around the board. because you have the 2 units of prosecutors, 2 units of witch seekers, and the Calidus doing stuff, and also a rhino, which that's nice. That's good to have. This was a list actually played by Leshu, who is an insanely good player on their squad. And I've had the privilege of playing Leshu 2 times. One time I was playing Tau, this was 2 years ago, and he was playing Imperial Knights, and I lost that game 15-5. That was a tough one. He went first, he sprinted at me, he made the right plays. I made mostly good plays, but I made a couple mistakes in there that I still think about. The game went bad, and then I had to try and salvage it from there. He was really good. And then I played him recently at Eurotrash Cup, where he was playing Death Guard, and I was playing double Caladius, 15 Wardens, 5 Guard, Draxus, characters, and I won 15-5, and I got him back, all right? So we're even now, Leshu. I'm watching you, all right? Like, I'll see you in the future. But then what did I see when I looked at WTC lists? I saw Leshu running double Caladius Custodes. How about that?
He had direct experience with the list.
Yeah, he had direct experience with, wow, these Caladius are really frustrating. He's an incredible player. I have no doubt that he is doing something very good here. I don't know what their matrix looks like, so I don't know the exact role it plays on the team. It scores points. It forces your opponent to come at you in teams because you have a bunch of Wardens and Guard and Draxus and tanks. You're pretty decent in 2 units of Adeptus. You're pretty decent at scoring points because you have more trash than the standard list. And you also have a decent amount of just get the hell off me. Because if your opponent walks in, you can hit them with Warden's Guard. You can rapid ingress both squads of Adeptus and shoot them with the tanks. And your opponent's like, oh, I did not like that. Thank you very much. So I could see Custodes being pretty decent in teams as like a grind your opponent to a halt and try and score like an 11 or 12 sort of army. I did not look through all of his pairings. I know he put a severe beatdown on Sean's Aeldari, which is not a matchup I would have wanted to take as Sean, to be clear. I think having played it from the other side, I think the Custodes are quite solid there. I have not looked at the rest of his matchups, but he is one of the best players I've ever had the privilege of playing into. I know Quentin also had a razor-tight game into him at WCW, so whatever you're going to put in his hands is going to do a really good job.
Yeah, Sean Naden had a hard time into them. It's not the only thing he had a hard time into. Somebody mentioned the Primaris Crusader spam.
Not underrated now, baby. It was before, for sure.
Not by us, though. We had been talking about it since the April data slate era, and I actually had played against it, so I believe you had written a list for it in the Black Templars State of the Faction back then. So we had talked about it, just none of us want to build and paint that many Primaris Crusader bodies.
So my main issue, if we talk about that for a second, because it was underrated before Olivier wrecked
100% it was underrated.
Everyone with it, like everyone.
And not just beat them, wrecked. It was the WTC of Olivier Weiss, for sure.
And he did amazingly. Like, damn. He's so good.
Straight up impressive.
So the thing about that list was I had beforehand, if you asked me about Space Marine lists and teams, I would always float it as an option that is very good in teams. 2 reasons I never took it. 1, I own literally 0 Primaris Crusaders. And I mean, I own 20, I think, in box. And you're not, it is not my preferred style of play. It's not what I prefer to do on a table. Like, it's good. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is putting 100 dudes on the board is not my favorite thing to do. Even if it's good, you're going to have to do a little persuasion to get me to build and paint 100 of those bastards. So I didn't want to do that. The other part of it is if I'm playing in teams, and I've been playing in a lot of teams, it is rare that I get Space Marines, first off. And second off, Space Marines have to compete against each other a lot. And that means that you're not just saying, hey, does it earn a spot on the 8, which 100 Crusaders absolutely, at 100 Crusader percent earns a spot on the list, on the roster. But you have to ask, is it better than Dark Angels? Is it better than Blood Angels? Is it better than Stormlance Space Wolves? Is it better than Champions of Rust Space Wolves? Is it better than Ironstorm? Is it better than, and like there's 4 other archetypes I'm sure I'm forgetting. And the answer is Sometimes, right? Sometimes if your team comp says that that's what you want, yes, it is better. But oftentimes something else is better, or that's the army I have built and painted. That's the army I know. That's the one I'm going with. So it was an army I thought went under the radar for a long time, and Olivier finally exploded out from under the radar. Now there is no more radar. There's just Crusaders, and so I'm very happy for him, legitimately.
All right, World Eaters. They were one of the strongest armies in the game by win rate. I don't think anybody thinks that they're underrated.
Well, there's one person who underrates them.
Well, I mean,
there's one guy.
We could watch Wednesday's game again.
We could watch Wednesday's game again. That was just yesterday. Still up. You can still watch it. It was fun. I'll give you a little teaser. All right. Nick called them easy mode. Nick said the army's easy. All you do is run at your opponent and table them. It's easy. Anyone can do it. And I was like, Nick, if you think that's so much, why don't you play them into me? What army would you like me to play? And he went GSC. And well, if you want to find out how that game went, you can check out the game yesterday. But one of us scored 0 teams points, and
it's not good.
Not good. I think they're really, really good. And that's it. I think people have seen that they are good, and I think they are. Yeah.
T-Suns, no way they're underrated. One of the best armies in the game. They have been since the edition launched. They are ludicrously strong. One of the top 3 for sure.
They've gotten hit recently, but not enough.
Hasn't stopped their win rate.
They're still quite good.
They're
still very good.
Dominant. Space Wolves, also not underrated, certainly in the meta. Maybe they're this is one of those factions that could have been underrated here, but not so much on the meta because people play against the Stormlance all the time and get within 9 inches of them and then shoot Space Wolves.
I do think Stormlance is better than we in the house give it credit for.
It's good. It plays one way.
It plays one way, but yeah, it's a pretty good way. But it does only play one way. So you can run into some problems. For sure. No questions asked. Would I take the list to singles? Maybe. Probably not. It's not particularly dynamic. It is a weapon in teams.
It doesn't always win tournaments, but it performs well at big tournaments.
For sure. You can run into a matchup that's just not good. I think like World Eaters, I think, do really well into them because they have no defenses against melee.
Yeah, the -1 to -wound is shooting.
Yeah, exactly. I think Dark Angel, anything that has like durable units that hit you with a lot of damage too is going to be a problem, especially ones that are fast. So Blood Angels, World Eaters is a real issue. I think that it's a weapon in pairings because if you get it into the wrong army for your opponent, you just annihilate them. The army moves so fast and everything advances and charges. So if you get it into like MSU Aeldar, they are just dead, right? Like you're just going to surge across the board really, really fast. 1 unit rapid ingresses on turn 1, and you just hit your opponent, not the hardest in the world, but hard enough for them, and you just cleave through them. They're good into things like Catan, because they're half damage, then +1 means you're still damage 2, and you can cut through Catan as well. And even if you can kill them, theoretically, or can survive them, can you do it fast enough? Because they are going to be on every objective, and they are kind of slow to kill. So I think they're quite solid. They're definitely not underrated, though, in the broader community. People know they're quite good.
Champions Rus is more underrated.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Go ahead.
Champions of Rus is their index attachment. They got a massive buff recently.
Was one of the worst attachments in the game.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't even particularly close. It was basically Black Templars, where you had to, show the detachment that you were a really good boy before it would let you have a detachment rule. And that was not great. Now that you can start with sustained hits, more than likely, so that you get advance and charge off of a stratagem, the army changed quite a lot. It changed quite a lot. Now it feels like a cohesive army again. Champions of Rus is actually a very good detachment now. And all it took was the one change. I think it's very solid. It has a great toolkit. And as time goes on, the army does become the detachment rule becomes ridiculous as time goes on. If like turn 2, you get a kill on a vehicle with a character, something that is not hard to do because your characters hit really hard. Black Death Dude will kill a Land Raider, like no questions. You take a foot captain with Finest Hour, so he's anti-monster vehicle, and then dev wounds, and you get in there and you're just like with an assault intercession, you're just like, you're dead, cool, bye-bye. And then your character killed a monster vehicle, you turn on lethal hits for your whole army, and then that gives you +1 AP, or that gives you lance or +1 AP you get the second half of, which is really good. And then, maybe one of your characters survives. All of a sudden, your army is a 6 of Feel No Pain, 6 of Feel No Pain, lethal hits, and sustained hits. And every stratagem has now 2 parts to it, where it's like lance +1 AP, and advance and charge, advance and shoot. And like suddenly the detachment is firing on all cylinders. It just couldn't get there before. Now it can. And that's cool. That's really cool, actually. I love Champions of Rust. I think they turned the worst designed index detachment into one of the best. I think that's really awesome.
We got Mr. F here with a €5 super chat. Thanks so much. Tips to play on World Eaters into Guard with like 1,200 points of Rust Dorn spam. The other 20+ model infantry spam. Just getting tabled and overwatched.
So what you want to do, picture a little bubble around each of your units, right? That bubble is probably about 12 inches. That bubble is really annoying for Imperial Guard to move into. If your units are behind a wall and they can't shoot you, which you can pre-measure, then that bubble, it's a threat bubble, your opponent can't really move into it. And if they do move into it, how about you charge them? And then you can hand them a bunch of no fallback checks off Exalted, and life turns sad really fast, actually. What you want to do is you don't want to go to your opponent. You want to put those bubbles over the objectives and then put like spawn on the objectives. And if they shoot the spawn, you sticky the objective when they die, or they don't shoot them enough because the spawn are like ridiculously durable. And then that forces your opponent to bring resources to you, allowing you to jump them. And then once you jump them, you go full throttle. Angron picks up a vehicle. Exalted 8-bound pick up vehicles. Hand them a bunch of no fallback checks, and they don't like that. So World Eaters into Imperial Guard, if it is not on like completely barren, empty table, is actually, in my opinion, pretty World Eater favored. But you do have to play it right.
All right. Leaves of Votan, they're the poster child of just plain fair 40k. No chance that they're underrated. Imperial Knights, if anything, they're overrated. They actually have a 51%. I checked the stat check thing. They have a 51% win rate, which, by golly, that's impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
I think that they're one of the worst armies in the game still. I think they don't have a lot of tricks or shenanigans. They will get a boost from the agents getting actual points now, so that they can take some pretty decent Imperial agent units. But they have a very big problem with AP and lack of ignores cover, and they really hate hit modifiers. So you're going to see a game in the Worm coming up with Admech versus Knights, and the hit modifiers everywhere was just an absolute problem for the Knights to try and deal with.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't think they're underrated, for sure.
No, I think Team Sweden did some interesting things with their Imperial Knights, and they did really well at WTC, but I still think the army's just very limited.
Grey Knights definitely not underrated. Really strong army overall. Drukhari, also nobody's underrating them except for us, which are overrated, or we believe they're
I think they're one of the most overrated armies in the game.
It's the opposite.
Yeah. They have problems. They have serious problems. Their units, they're very reliant on everything always going according to plan. And as soon as things don't go according to plan, or there's a funny Overwatch,
failed
or
charge,
your opponent
Overwatch,
failed charge, or you didn't kill something you thought you were, which happens.
Or you don't get back your pain tokens in the shooting phase that you expected to get back from the Chronos.
Yeah, like Quentin put it to me like this. Let's say your opponent takes a Rhino, puts it on the center objective. They've not exposed anything else. They don't have a unit in the Rhino. How many Scourges with Haywire Blasters do you get out to shoot at this Rhino? And I thought about it for a second. I was like, there is no right answer. So the reason for that is because if you expose all 3 units and your first unit aces the Rhino.
Just boom, 15 mortals.
Yep, just 15. It happens. I've watched them do 18. It happens. They leave, they go behind a wall, and your opponent picks up both units of Scourges that didn't get to shoot. But if you expose 1 unit and it does 3 mortals, yeah, your opponent keeps the vehicle. If you expose 2 units and the first one aces it, you lose the second. It's also definitely possible that the first 2 shoot and don't kill it because they're very swingy.
Well, this actually happened in the game, the Admech vs. Drukhari game, where Quinn shot the first unit, killed the transport he was expecting to kill, committed all 3 units. But don't worry, there was other stuff in the middle of the table, so he goes to shoot the Skystalkers. He's not good at killing them, but he just needs to activate his shooting. So he kills the one model. Well, guess what? The other unit wasn't within 18 of anything else, so I lone op the Skystalkers that are still on the middle objective, get the middle objective. He can't send the last unit of Scourges behind because they can't activate, and they just die for free.
The entire
like
army
a series of problems.
Yeah, the entire army is like that. If you send in a unit of incubi and they get overwatched and they lose a couple guys, a thing that happens, suddenly they don't kill the target they wanted to kill. They die in response to basically anybody.
Jazius, the difference is that Drukhari...
No, he's responding to him.
Oh, okay. I thought he was responding to us.
No. The problem is
they're paper thin.
Yeah, Drukhari is reliant on A, your plan's always working, and B, they're relying on your opponent not also being good enough to play the game, right? If you are the only one acting upon the game because your opponent is lower skill level than you, then your plans will always work, right? But if your opponent is also making plays, their plays to get like 5 scouts in range of one of your power units will just ace that power unit. But 5 mandrakes is not going to pick up terminators. So it doesn't go both ways. We've found that Drukhari tend to struggle into even skilled matchups. There were a lot of WTC teams that took them. I don't believe they did particularly well. And I believe the reason that they were taken is because WTC teams, by definition, are composed of the best players from that country. So if the best players from that country are testing into the rest of the country, they will feel like Drukhari are pretty decent. But we have not found that to be true in-house when both players are of equal skill and one player has units that die to anything and one player does not. And also, like, the problem that's come up a lot of times for Quentin is his shooting phase goes sideways, which means he doesn't have pain tokens for his fight phase, and then his fight phase goes sideways, and then he has no army. And that has happened several times, and we've experienced the army having several problems like that.
Like I said, I'm going to give Real Space Raid a real try in the future. So Deathwatch, no longer an actual army. Unfortunately, rip Deathwatch. I have Deathwatch myself. Sad days. Death Guard. Nope. Not going to say that's underrated. They're kind of middle of the pack now. Same with Chaos Knights. Demons is a bit interesting. The Monster Mash is something you see all over the place, but you have a unique take on demons.
I think they're actually pretty decent.
They have a very good win rate.
In teams specifically. The reason they're good in teams is because they're not like an take-all-comers kind of army. If your opponent has a lot of anti-tank, then
it's just problematic.
It's problematic. It's not unsolvable, but it is problematic because you're not going to pick up enemy tanks at anything approaching speed. I don't think
about
the mono... Yeah, okay, cool. He picked up the 1. Very proud of him for that. I don't think the monocorn is good. Full stop. I don't think it's a good army. I think it relies on your opponent not... Your thing is you drop units 6 inches away and go for charges. If your opponent lets that be real units, then they're in trouble. But if your opponent doesn't let that be real units and has screens...
You're in trouble.
Then you're in trouble. And screening is definitely something that is not as big a skill in 10th edition as it was in previous editions. It used to be if you didn't screen, you just got ruined. And now that's not like always the case. So I definitely think there is some amount of like game-wide knowledge that's been lost there on how to like just continue, keep up screens, keep your opponent from deep striking anywhere relevant. The thing I like demons for, and you can 3-inch deep strike and you can't charge. So I don't like Khorne. The thing I like demons for is I think they have some really undercosted data sheets for durability specifically. And so things like keepers are 290, but are like brutally hard to kill. And the Great Unclean ones are decent. I like the one with a 4 at Feel No Pain is also ridiculously hard to kill.
We've ranked him top 10 character.
Yeah, for sure. And the Kairos is really good as well because the Vector on a guy that doesn't die immediately is annoying, obnoxious. He has an indirect gun. He gets you CP back, I suppose. Like he does good things. And Then the bird with the gun is also pretty good to teleport around, pick angles, and shoot.
The bird with a gun.
The bird with the gun. You know the one.
The bird with gun.
The bird with the gun is also pretty good. Rodigus is pretty good. And you can run a list that takes 6 or even 7 of these bigger demons. 7's a little harder, but we did run that. We did make that team for our Quentin and I for our ATC team. And I think it's pretty good. I've watched it get shot for 5 turns and still score 15 at bottom of game by things like Votan, which is not an army you think is going to do that. So I don't know. I think the high toughness durability skew is pretty good check on opponents in teams. It's tough to consistently say you do anything into it. It's tough to say you're going to pass your saves and be fine, but, introduce a little chaos. Yeah, I think it's cool. If your opponent has only a couple guns and for 2 turns in a row, they just roll 70% of their expected damage, you just run them over because you just have 7 monsters that are on every objective and they just can't get rid of them fast enough. Also, keepers are miserable to try to kill. -1 to hit and a 5-up feel no pain on an 18 wound model. It's toughness 10 with a 4-up invuln is bananas. They also start healing when they're below half. Offensive wise, they are overcosted. Their offense is terrible. Defensive wise, they are insane. So for teams, they're pretty good to just be like, here you go, chew on this. I think they're a little underrated. Mostly in teams. In singles, they don't have a lot of agency.
Ryan G here with a $10 super chat. Thanks so much, Ryan. Quick question. How do you deal with Green Tide as Tau? 100 boys are so difficult to shift with a 5-up invuln. Feel no pain from Pain Boy. This is with 3 units of Breachers. Well, there's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I actually played against Team USA's Green Tide player who actually took them. This was before WTC, but he took them WTC. His name's Lucas Troller. Really good player. I played him at DreamHack Dallas on the Showmatch stream. So if you want to watch me playing Monka, and this was pre-nerf Green Tide, I beat it with Monka, and you can watch exactly how I did it in that stream game. So I believe it was streamed by Tactical Tortoise. So if you go back to... What was it? Was it in May or early June?
No. It was in June.
Early June. Go back to early June, the DreamHack Dallas stream, and it would have been round 1 we played them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Round
yes.
1.
Yes. Round 1 we
so
played USA.
Round 1 on the stream is me playing Monka Tau with 3 units of Breachers as well, with Fireblades, and then into the Green Tide. So check that out because it'll give you a good sense of how to play against it.
Yep. All right. We've got Blood Angels next, and Black Templars. I would not say they're underrated at all.
I think this is easy too, because Imperial Agents, they're going to be mostly an ally in the meta instead of a fully fledged flat faction. And then Emperor's Children's nothing real yet.
That's some really good art, though. I want to say that for Emperor's Children. That goes hard, but yeah.
So I think our 2 potential picks here are right here. Guard and Aeldari. Do you want to start with Aeldari?
I would love to start with Aeldari. So Quentin and I have been workshopping an Aeldari list for quite some time. For the last probably, I've been working on one for several months. I took it once or twice. It did pretty well, and then Quentin provided the last little burst of ideas that unlocked the actual potential in the army. And it was very impactful. He suggested putting Wraithguard back in the list, and that was incredibly strong. It was transformative for how the list functioned. I think MSU Aeldari is not good. I think it's just not a good army. I think it is fine, I guess, if you're really good with it, but it suffers from a lot of the same problems that Drukhari has, although it is more durable, right? It has units that have a 3-up armor save in cover, and that's, it's fine. I don't think MSU Aeldari is particularly great. I think it's a liability in teams. I think it has a lot of bad matchups in singles. I don't think it's great. But I do think the kind of Eldar army that Quentin and I have been working on is actually really, really strong. It involves Wraithguard again, because they got nerfed, and then the entire strength of the game came down precipitously, which means that, hey, guess what? Wraithguard are really good again. You just stand them behind a wall, control the center with lone ops and stuff like that, and you tell your opponent, the look on your opponent's face when you put in a lone op on the center objective 15 inches away from their shooting units, and you go, okay, All right. So a 3 on a Phantasm will get my lone op to the other side of the wall. Or a 2 will stand him up because he has Phoenix Gem. But you definitely 100% of the time will lose your unit for trying. Do you want to do anything about it? And the answer a lot of the times is no. And you get to outscore people on primary because they lose, like, they can either deny your points and lose units, and you lose nothing because your guy, like, just runs behind a wall or stands back up or whatever. And then your Wraith Guard pop out from behind the wall, ace whatever's in the center of the board, and then fire and fade back. You just enforce that for a little bit. And then right when your opponent's getting comfortable and they've lost a couple units, then you just bowling ball them. You know, your opponent's lost a Castigator, a second Castigator, an Immolator, because you're fire and fading, you're picking stuff up, and you actually have pretty good profiles in that stuff. All of a sudden, you go, now's my time. And you take there's also a 12 brick of Harlequins with Vizark and Yvrain, which I think is a very good unit now. You jam it into your opponent, tie a bunch of stuff up, maybe kill some things. The Avatar, which is also in the list, goes woo-wee, and just gets into the center of their army, starts threatening Overwatches, hits a unit with, D3 plus 1 shots, or auto hits it, 14, 4, D6 plus 2. The Wraith Guards shoot and fire and fade forward, or oftentimes shoot and charge a skirmish unit and beat it to death with their rifle butts. And all of a sudden your opponent goes, oh no, I have been whittled and the time is running short. I can no longer deal with this. And then they get wrecked. And it's been my experience. It's a very good army. I really like it. And I think it is something that is a new archetype. Like, legitimately, it is a new and unique archetype that Quentin and I have come up with. And I think it's really strong.
Yeah. I think it's very strong, and we're going to see plenty of games coming out soon with those Aeldari. So if you want to see more games, check out theworm.vhx.tv. You're going to see tons of, not only an Aeldari masterclass update for Pariah Nexus that includes a variety of list archetypes along these lines, but also a bunch of games. So if you're excited about that, and then Quinn's also doing Aeldari group coaching starting next month, which you can find on the artofwar40k.com.
Yep. The best weapon for the Wraith Guard is the Wraith Cannon. The D-Scythe or whatever, the D6 one, not good. You want the Wraith Cannon. Range especially, but it's also really good because sometimes you fail guide.
Hey, to the Drukhari players in chat saying that we're wrong, prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Get out there. I'm excited that you're excited about your faction. Get out there. There's an event called DreamHack Atlanta. If you come to DreamHack Atlanta, you win the singles event and or you play against the Art of War team and beat one of us with Drukhari, I will do an entire video talking about why I was wrong about Drukhari and why you're awesome.
Absolutely.
Right there. Do it.
We go to events all the time.
Come and play us.
If you feel,
I'd be excited to see it. Genuinely,
yeah,
that'd be awesome to see. All right, and then last is Guard. So Guard have changed as a faction. Now you can still run indirect fire. The French WTC team still had some Earthshaker batteries or a couple of the indirect pieces, but not 4 or 5 of them anymore. That's not really a real thing. But what Guard does exceptionally well isn't really its shooting. It has some pretty solid shooting. Tank commanders are quite good. You still can make indirect fire do some decent things. The Lehman Russes are relatively cheap for a durable tank chassis. And then you have Rogaldorns, which are, I think, pretty reasonably priced for the firepower that you get. However, it's their durable and annoying layers of board control that can be very difficult to deal with. And that's not what you expect from Guard. But John has been trying a lot of lists. You saw both France and England took Guard and did very well. With Nassim and I'm forgetting the French player's name, but he did extremely well. I believe finished top 10 with his Guard. So a lot of Guard doing well out there, and it's on the back of things like 18 Bulgrin, several Chimeras or Hellhounds with a lot of pressure up the table in terms of scoring. It's all relatively durable to kill, like 70-point Chimera or something like that. 55-point dudes pop out that are OC2. You have a lot of amazing OC control with the army. The plus 3-inch move is super helpful. And then you have Scions coming in, rapid ingress, contest objectives away. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with Guard. So I think this army is pretty underrated. Not as a firepower army, but as a board control army and a point scoring army. Typically, they don't win by just tabling you. And that's maybe some people's impression of Guard. They win by outscoring you and just surviving longer than they should.
I definitely there's a spectrum there, right? So I think any top tier Guard list starts with basically 18 Bulgrin. The reason for that is that they're just miserable to try to get through quickly. And Guard is more than willing to give you other things that you have to worry about, right? They are more than willing to say, here's 5 Russes, here's 3 Rogaldorns, here's a bunch of tanks that are spraying bullets downrange at you. And if you ignore them, you will get killed. Like, they shoot hard. They do shoot hard, and you can build into that. Like, there is the board control, double flamer tank. I forget the name.
The Hellhound.
The Hellhound, thank you. Double flamer tank. There are 18 Bulgrin, right? Double, triple Chimera with Catachans in them. That sort of board control list does exist. It can do very well. I think Naz used it at WTC. But you can also build a list that's just like 18 Bulgrin with like 6 Lehman Russes behind it, or 3 Rogaldorns and 2 Lehman Russes behind it. And that list is also really strong because it is a legitimate threat that you are going to get killed. And as you fight the battle, the 18 Bulgrin are just chilling on objectives, racking in points. And then you very well might just get killed by all the tanks because they are good, aggressively costed tanks. But even if you win the fight, you're like, oh, whew, all right, I have the shattered remains of my army left, but my opponent's tanks are dead. Time to take over the game. And you look down and there's 18 Bulgrin, 6 Bulgrin on each of the midfield objectives. And you're like, oh no. And
it's hard to deal with.
It's hard
even
to deal with.
Damage armies.
It puts you in a bind, right? If you deal with the Bulgrin first, it takes you like 2 turns, and then you just get shot by tanks for like the rest of the game, and you probably don't have enough resources left to prevent the tanks from just sitting on objectives. But if you shoot at the tanks, then the Bulgrin just vibe there, racking in 15s, beating up any trash that comes into the center of the board, any skirmish units that come into the center. Bulgrin will beat the daylights out of. So I think they're really good. Legitimately, I think they're really solid. I quite like Guard, especially in teams.
Yeah, I think they're very underrated right now. Maybe not necessarily by the very top echelon of players, but I think the overall meta underrates them.
Yeah.
So what would you say here if we had to decide? I think I'm going to go with Guard as my choice for most underrated.
I think I would go with Guard. I think they're one of the best team lists in the game. They're a rock solid singles army.
Yep, they have both aspects of them. And they have a bit more variety. Like, it's not just you have to run 18 Bulgrin. You could run 12 and still do well, but 18 is just 180 points for that. They were cheaper. They were cheaper.
There are some data sheets that get worse as you take more of them. And there are some data sheets that get better as you take more of them. A prime example of the first one would be Wraithguard. A second unit of Wraithguard doesn't receive the buffs of the first. There's only really room in your list for one unit that does the thing that Wraithguard do. They don't fire and fade. They don't do blah, 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 whatever. Right? Second unit Wraithguard, terrible. First unit Wraithguard, great. Then there are data sheets that get better the more you take. They would be things like Brigands. They would be things like, Death Company, Van Vets, things like that. And one of the biggest examples of those is Bulgrin. 6 Bulgrin, whatever. 12 Bulgrin, all right, that's pretty nasty. 18 Bulgrin, I pull my hair out. You just can't get through it all. Like, I can kill 6 Bulgrin. I can eventually kill 12 Bulgrin. If I see 18 Bulgrin across the table from me, my hair's going in every direction, man. Like, it's going to be a hair fest. You're going to think it's a barber shop.
They are literally budget Deathwing Knights.
Yes. Yeah. And against some...
That's not bad.
No.
that's not disrespect to Bulgrin.
No, against some targets, they literally are like, against some offensive profiles, they are the same durability as Deathwing Knights. There's 3 wounds with -1 damage and a 6-up feel no pain, and 4 wounds with -1 damage and no 6-up feel no pain are pretty comparable. The thing that Deathwing Knights have is that 2-up armor save. So they are more durable. But against like las cannons and stuff like that, they just aren't. And so that means against some things, it feels like you have 18 Deathwing Knights. And critically, it's the stuff that wants to be going after the tanks that really wants to be doing the Bulgrin killing, and vice versa.
All right. Well, we got a super chat here, $5 super chat. I'm going to assume this is Kyle. I'm already laughing. I own 26.5 cats. Sorry for that point.
It's the 0.5 that causes me issues here. Yeah.
I love Art of War, but my cats don't. When are we going to see more cat-forward content? More cats on table mid-game? Show me Quentin shaking a toy bird.
Listen, how many... Quentin has a cat. I have 2 cats. And Nick has a dog. So we're very pet-friendly here. And I don't know, maybe do a cat stream. Get them all over here. Just put them on camera. Have them play Warhammer.
I'm allergic to cats.
We don't do that though.
But otherwise, it would be cool. I like cats. I like animals in general, but I am allergic to cats.
That's sad. That's very
I've
sad.
always had dogs in my life. But you're definitely pet friendly. Thanks so much for the super chat. All right, well, so that was an interesting one. If you do disagree with us, tell us in the comments below. We'd be happy to hear that. And if you've been hanging out with us, please do give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends about us. All of that massively helps us grow the channel. In addition, if you think Drukhari one of the best armies in the game, come over to DreamHack Atlanta and show us.
Listen,
Ham Sandwich, we want to see you.
I want Drukhari to be good. I just don't think that they are.
I think they're good. I just don't think they're like world class good.
No, they would never
There's a
make
difference.
they would never make an 8-man team for me. Like if I was in control of every list that was on the team, they'd never make the 8. And like, I mean, I don't want them to be bad. Like it's not a thing. I just think that they are.
We're saying they should get buffs is what you should be happy about.
But whatever. I mean, people have different opinions about all kinds of things, and this is fairly small one as far as things go. So if you think they're good, keep doing well with them. Eventually things will sort themselves out and everyone will be happy.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you do want to see some more content, like the Aeldari list that Jack was talking about, or some of these new guard lists, check out the worm.vhx.tv. There's a 3-day free trial. Tons of awesome content in there for you to enjoy, as well as joining our awesome Discord community. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you all very soon for more. So long for now.
Bye-bye.